All right. How's everybody doing this morning? Hope everybody's doing well. I'd like to welcome you to my channel. If you've never been here before, my name is 12 Gauge. Thank you for stopping by and paying homage to my channel and giving me a chance to give you information on various forms of true crime. This morning I'd like to talk about something that I've been researching off and on for a while. And this is about the long hauls and the murderous ways of long haul truckers. Hence the title of today's live stream, Truckers That Kill. If I have time and I don't make this live too long, I'm going to go into a broadcast that was done by CNN and discuss a certain trucker that was out there killing on the roads. And to begin with, though, I'd like to start showing a video on the various states that the FBI has formulated a map to show over 500 people that have been killed on America's highways. So let me get that started and then we'll continue on. This is under the fair use policy, and I'm doing this just for educational purposes, not for any other reason. Understand that I'm commenting on material that's already been made by other entities. So, with that being stated, I'm going to institute my fair use right to commentate on it. And here we go with the FBI map that shows the serial killers on the road. I need to delete that one. That screen formula that just wipes everything out. So let's go ahead and begin with this. And I hope you enjoy the newscast. Here we go.
Right now, we have multiple serial killers operating in the United States, without a doubt.
According to the FBI, those serial killers could be connected to dozens and dozens of unsolved murders.
Investigators are actively working to track them down by focusing in on a specific pool of suspects.
Jessica Schmidt explains what they're doing now to prevent another person from becoming a victim in this story from the Crime Vault.
Oh, yeah. In 2004, after noticing a pattern of murdered women being dumped along interstates, the FBI launched its Highway Serial Killings Initiative. The map you see behind me shows where bodies and remains have been found along highways in 500 cases over the course of 30 years. 20 years later, the FBI's work has led to several arrests and to hundreds of suspects. And today, investigators do believe most of those suspects are long-haul truckers. But they want to make it clear they're focusing in on a very small portion of them, as most truck drivers are innocent, hard workers, like a local man we talked to, Tim Reynolds. Tim Reynolds stepped into the trucking industry 35 years ago. Spending more than 2 decades on the road gave his passion a purpose.
Dad drove truck, grandparents drove truck, mom drives truck. Not only is it a family thing, it's a childhood dream.
Now a CDL training manager at Butler Tech, Reynolds is teaching the next generation how to safely steer a semi. While tough at times, it's a profession Reynolds describes as incredibly important.
If the trucking industry was to stop today, you would be completely out of everything in 3 days. Grocery stores would be empty shelves, gas stations without gas. So this is a constant moving, vital part of, this whole country.
Although the majority of the more than 3 million truckers in the U.S. are hardworking men and women dedicated to keeping the economy moving like Reynolds, the FBI believes there is a dark side to the business, thanks to a very small group of very bad people.
The number one profession.
As they said at the very beginning, as she was talking about, over 500 murders over the span of 20 years. That's quite a bit. based on how many truckers have been on these roads in 20 years. And like she said, not all truckers are involved in this, but there's a small percentage that run these roads and have these instances happen. And there's been a lot of them caught. I mean, don't feel like that they're still on the roads and they haven't been caught, because there's been some that have been caught, and I will highlight some of those later on in some other streams. Because it's the access point, and one of the documentaries that I'm going to show today will show you more insight on that. So here we go with the rest of the video. This individual wrote long haul, and if you can, go out and read the book, right? Read the book and get what you can out of that.
For serial killers is long haul trucker.
Federal investigators believe a handful of serial killers operating as long-haul truckers are likely responsible for 850 murders spread across multiple states and spanning decades. Former FBI Assistant Director Frank Figluzzi says the good news is many of those cases are now solved.
There are 25 long haul truckers already in prison for multiple murders. There have been cases in the greater Cincinnati and the larger Ohio area.
John Fortenberry was working as a long-haul trucker when he murdered a Milford man in 1991. He was convicted and executed after investigators discovered he'd gone on a cross-country killing spree. But according to the FBI, there are still around 200 cases considered open and active.
Right now, we have multiple serial killers operating in the United States, without a doubt. The suspect pool for all of those within the trucking community is 450 suspects right now.
Determined to help narrow that down, Figluzzi, now retired, started investigating on his own. He researched, pulled data from the FBI's Highway Serial Killings Initiative, and traveled across the U.S. with the long-haul trucker to experience the lifestyle.
I rode flatbed, which is a different kind of very active physical trucking, with a very gracious driver who tolerated me for over 2,000 miles.
His work led him to a key conclusion. These killers are cold, calculated, and clever.
An 18-wheeler is a mobile crime scene. What do I mean by that? These killers are grabbing their victims in one jurisdiction, killing or raping them in a second jurisdiction, and dumping the body in a third jurisdiction.
The victims targeted by the killers are typically vulnerable women struggling with addiction. Many were sex trafficked before their deaths, Figluzzi says, either recruited online or spotted at truck stops and forced to live a life they couldn't escape. It's those details that add a layer of complexity to these cases.
Most of these remains have no ID on them, whether that's the trafficking victim.
That's interesting what they just said right there. That's a name that I've heard that truckers have given women that work the truck stop, kind of like Jeff says. He said, I remember listening to this woman in an AA meeting talk about her and her friend making money doing stuff at a truck stop, and then she saw her friend's body being found in a dumpster there by police. It's a very terrible name given to women, that do that line of work. But what I was saying, as far as this individual said, it's a mobile crime scene. And that's an interesting view on this, because it's true. Like you said, they get abducted in one state, murdered or raped in another, and then dumped or disposed in another jurisdiction. And it's very difficult to pinpoint exactly where and why and how it happened. There's a lot of sex trafficking at these truck stops, because these individuals are gone from home for so long. They have needs that are not being met on the road. So it's almost like you pull into a truck stop, you can take a shower, you can get something to eat, you can get a haircut, you can get clothes, you can get toiletries, you can get just about anything you need at these truck stops, including, sex. So you get into the wrong truck, something bad could really happen to you. And here's another comment. That's right, I've heard the term before. That's basically prostitutes at a truck stop parking lot. Yes. Good morning, Carla. Good morning, Carl. Yeah, money for sex. I mean, it's for the people that are doing it correctly and are not murdering people, we need them out there because, like the individual said, within 3 days, you would literally run out of food, run out of fuel, run out of everything if they just stop hauling things across the country. Let's finish this up.
Them deliberately not carrying ID, or whether that's the trucker taking the ID to make it much harder. Sometimes taking the ID as a souvenir.
Survivors of sexual slavery shared their stories with him to help him better understand what the women being preyed on are going through.
I interviewed one woman who was a preacher's kid. I interviewed another woman who was a brilliant a bookkeeper who had a year of college. Commonalities. Very often it's early childhood trauma in the form of unwanted touching. Very often it's early introduction to drug use in the form of marijuana. And then rapidly the drugs get harder as a series of really bad trauma develops in their family environment.
To protect the ongoing investigations, Figluzzi can't reveal details about the list of current suspects or the patterns they've recently uncovered. He did tell us the FBI is using company logs, gas station receipts, and other records to build timelines. And when they can,
excuse the microwave in the background. I'm heating me up some coffee. But like the individual just stated, I'm gonna buy that book. I think I'm gonna go to Amazon and buy the online book. That way I can read it because it sounds interesting. I mean, for nothing more than to get an insight on how this counterculture has become part of the true crime community. You know what I mean? Like, who would have thought that the individuals that are supplying our country with so much stuff can become so treacherous on these roads? You know, and we need them. Like you said, there's a small variation of truckers that do this. Not all of them do this, so don't freak out or think that I'm talking about every trucker. But there's a small unit that has engaged in this, and it's sad. It's very sad. I mean, there's been cases also where long haul truckers have been abducting children and trafficking them or taking illegals from the border to states. And I've heard where they pulled over these trucks and there's been multiple deaths in the back because there's no air conditioning, there's little to no food, there's no place to use a restroom or anything like that, because they're on such a um tight route to get them to wherever so they can get their money.
they're using forensic genealogical DNA.
Only about a tiny fraction of truckers who kill. The rest are family people trying to feed their families by giving us our food on our table.
For dedicated, innocent drivers like Reynolds, the FBI's data isn't just disturbing, it's disappointing.
It gives us all drivers a bad image with the general public. So it makes us all look bad. I would love to see them in and spend time behind bars, pay for your crimes, and let life move on.
While investigators work to eliminate suspects and identify the serial killers, Reynolds continues to train groups of aspiring truckers, encouraging them to not let anything deter them from focusing on the road ahead.
Don't drift away from a fantastic career because of somebody who's using the system and hurting lives and things like that. It's a very rare instance, and it's not a common thing, especially in the trucks and stuff like that.
And it is important to reiterate that federal investigators believe most of the millions of truck drivers on our roads are good people who should not be feared. Figluzzi took everything he learned from the trucker he traveled with, the sex trafficking survivors he spoke with, and his own research and put it into a book called Long Haul: Hunting the Highway Serial Killers. He says he's donating a portion of the book's profits to organizations that help survivors of human trafficking and organizations that support truckers. You can learn more about the FBI's initiative and the Butler Tech trucking program on our website. There, we also have some safety tips directly from the FBI. Jessica Schmidt, Fox 19 Now.
You can watch all of our crime.
You know, that's interesting to me that so much that goes into doing good for the community can be turned into evil. It just takes a small portion of a person set out for evil intent to ruin a good thing. Sorry about the background, guys. I'm still trying to get this all situated. There we go. That other blinking stuff was throwing me off. I hope you guys are doing well this morning. I'm heating up my coffee in a red Solo cup because I didn't feel like busting out the fine china. So I thought I'd start off this morning, for those of you that are coming in a little late, discussing long haul truckers and killings, you know. I wanted to do this a while back because I have some time to research criminal activities while I'm here after I do my studying and whatever. I have plenty of time to research, and this is an area that is very seldom talked about, that I've seen anyways. And how many truckers do we interact with on the roads? How many times do we stop at a Buc-ee's, or how many times do we stop at a truck stop and we run into individuals that are long haulers? And some of them, or not most of them, are just there to get refueled, get their necessities, and move on about their business. And like she said, not all are bad, Do the solo cup. Me and Jeff can play it and I can sing it, right? Yeah. I don't know. I like coffee out of a red Solo cup. I don't know why. It just tastes a little better. I like coffee cups as well, but I didn't feel like busting it out and having to wash it later and all that stuff. You know how that goes. But this next portion of the show, I'm going to show you. CNN did a broadcast on catching a serial killer in the Midwest, and this was in 2014. Yes, there's quite a bit. If you get on YouTube and you type in serial killers, truckers, there'll be you'll be shocked how many come up. They're the famous one. I'm trying to think. Let me go ahead and pull this up right quick. That way I can give you the name of the documentary. This is the one that really started it all. For me, as far as wanting to do this, let me give you his name. That way, if y'all want to later on, you can go ahead and go check him out. His name is, or let me just show you. Okay. His name is Robert Ben Rhodes. And let me show you. I don't know if you can see the screen. No, you can't. Let me stop sharing that one. Let me show you. this individual killed a lot of people on the open roads. His name is Robert Ben Rhodes. And this is the one. He had a mobile torture chamber in the back of his cab. I mean, this is pretty much another guy. I mean, it just on and on and on. You know, you can just go on and on about long haul truckers. They caught that guy, Robert Ben Rhodes, because he was parked at a rest area and a police officer noticed that he had a tail light out. And he went investigating. Well, he noticed that there was a woman chained to the back of his rig. And Robert lied and said that, you know, she was just paying for sex. He was paying for sex and it got a little rough, so he had to chain her up. And that's why she was chained up. And that she had pulled a knife on him and this, that, and the other. And it's really an interesting case. If you guys, have time, you might go and watch that. Like I said, CNN did this other one that I'm about to show you. This guy is really, really bad, you know. So let's go ahead and check this out.
Here in the Midwest, several young girls went missing. Some were found murdered. Others were never found at all. Lori DePease, 20, in Appleton, Wisconsin. Wendy Felton, 16, from Marion, Indiana. Michelle Dewey, 20, in Indianapolis, Indiana. All of these cases went unsolved. Officials believed only one man knew what happened.
We knew he was responsible for several deaths.
And to get answers, it would take a risky, unusual plan. Send a convicted drug dealer undercover into a dangerous prison to befriend an alleged serial killer.
I'm not a serial killer hunter. I said, so how am I going to do this?
At stake, answers.
Wondering where she is, wondering what happened.
Peace for grieving families.
You want to find her and you want to bring her home and you can't.
And one man's freedom.
They don't just turn around and give out candy and say, you're free to go. I went through hell and back.
You know, let me speak really quickly. Do you ever go and notice missing people's flyers? Do you ever stop and look at the information that's being given as far as the people that are missing? I used to not. I mean, I'm going to be honest. I used to just kind of look at the picture and move about my business. And I used to do the same thing online when people would post, well, this person was missing here, is this person was missing there. You know, I used to not take the time to do it, but over the years and especially being on this platform and on this panel, I've changed my whole approach and looking at the world around me, not in a cynical way, but in a way of being defensive and protective of not only me, but the people that I have around me at the time. I might suggest that to you guys. You know, I do that every stream. I try to reiterate that fact to be vigilant and hyper vigilant on your surroundings because so much can go wrong. And, you might not even interact with any trucker, but that doesn't mean that, you're pulling out. A trucker couldn't follow you or maybe try to run you off the road and then abduct you. I mean, there's some warped minds out there. And like I said, not all. There's a small percentage, but you don't want to be that small percentage that becomes a statistic. if you understand what I'm talking about. Well, let's talk about this guy.
Early each day, Donna Reitler greets her daughter, Tricia.
I say hello to this picture every morning. I say good morning every morning. I look at that and I can hear her say, "Hi, Mom."
Trisha was very kind-hearted, very smart.
As a child, says Father Gary, Tricia lit up the room.
She would sometimes just bound into the room, spread her arms apart, say, ta-da, that type of thing.
Donna and Gary brought Tricia here to Marion, Indiana to attend this small Christian college. One spring evening in 1993, Tricia left her dorm room for a walk. On March 29th, around 8 o'clock at night, Tricia Reitler came here to this shopping center. She bought a soda and a magazine and started walking back to campus. But then she disappeared.
Phone call came a little bit after midnight.
Once again, walking to the grocery store and then walking back to campus. What you're going to hear is some other people talk about this grocery store later on, and you're going to hear them say that they can see the campus from the grocery store. That's how close it was. So it's not always the distance between you and where you're going. It could be literally yards. It could literally be walking distances. So be mindful.
And the voice on the other side of the phone said, do you know where your daughter is?
19-year-old Tricia Lynn Reitler was last seen about 8 o'clock Monday night. She had just stopped.
Tricia's disappearance rocked the community and devastated her parents.
Who's ever responsible will never know what they've taken away from us.
Tricia's mother made a desperate appeal to Tricia on the Jerry Springer Show.
Hang in there and know that we love you, and we're doing everything we can to find you.
Despite huge media coverage and their pleas for answers, none ever came.
It's like she just vanished into thin air.
Tricia was never found.
Young college students, they need to be aware.
Kristen Zeller was a junior at IWU when Tricia disappeared.
We were advised to stay in our dorms if you were a girl.
But a week after Tricia's disappearance, Kristen and her roommate Heather needed to go to Marsh grocery store.
You thought you'd be safe. You thought it'd be fine. It's
Yeah.
a couple blocks away.
Exactly. It's not far at all. I can see the campus from Marsh. So, what's going to happen?
It was getting dark by the time they left the shopping center, walking the same route Tricia would likely have taken.
We were maybe halfway up the road when Heather turned to me and said, Did you happen to notice that brown van? And I said, no.
Then the van passed again, slowly.
We still weren't alarmed. He came by again.
A third time.
Yep, really slow this time. Looking at us, the hair on the back of our neck started to stand up.
The van pulled right up beside them.
How close? Show me.
His wheels were right on the side of the curb. And this was me, this was Heather. And he leaned over, started to say something. And at that point, we're both like, run, just run.
The girls called security, describing a two-tone van driven by a man with mutton chop sideburns. Officers spotted the van and questioned the driver, a man named Larry Hall. Hall said he'd been looking for a friend's address, but the address he gave didn't exist. So officers let Hall go.
So let me ask you guys in chat. Whenever you hear that police potentially had the person that was later responsible for these crimes and they let him go, do you feel that that's police negligence, or do you feel that, okay, that's all they had on the person, they had to let him go? That's just a question for you guys.
September 20th, 1993, 6 months after Tricia's disappearance, now 15-year-old Jessica Roach goes missing in Georgetown, Illinois. Investigator Gary Miller got the call.
We all knew that we had something really bad here. We had an abduction.
Jessica's badly decomposed body was found in an Indiana cornfield weeks later. But then, like Trisha's, Jessica's case went cold.
There's a lot of times you wonder whether you'll ever solve it, but you know that you're going to keep going. You're going to check everything out. You're going to recheck everything.
For over a year, Miller scoured local police reports. And then a break. A vehicle reported in a county nearby. The owner, Larry Hall.
He had been involved in stopping some girls. Those girls were scared. They ran from him.
In the last 6 months, Hall's van was spotted by more than 11 girls in 5 different towns close by, including those where Jessica lived and where her body was found. Now, Miller contacted the police in Hall's hometown to arrange for an interview.
He initially said no, he hadn't been over here.
Miller had to coax Hall to admit being near Jessica's house.
I said, well, would you remember if, you stopped and offered girls a ride or asked him to get in your van? He said, well, he stops and talks to everybody.
After a few questions, Miller took a gamble and put a photo of Jessica down in front of Hall.
He immediately flinched. He turned to his right and put his hand up over his face like he didn't want to see the picture. He told me he didn't think he'd ever seen that girl.
Later, a heartbreaking mystery.
There's so little that we can do to find her. I just want to bring her home.
And the dangerous plan to solve it.
So they got this guy again, and they asked him, had he ever seen this picture? And had he ever pulled over and tried to talk to girls? Young girls at that. And he said, I talked to a lot of people. Still no definitive evidence against him to be able to hold him. So he's continuing to repeat that behavior of approaching young girls and possibly even grabbing them and abducting them. So the escalation continues. And the pattern has already been set. So those are two things that I want you to pay attention to when we're talking about this case. Pattern, opportunity, and escalation.
Larry Hall and his brother Gary had always been a little different.
Look at you two little boys. Well, which one are you and which one's Larry?
This would be me.
Gary and Larry.
In a rare recorded interview obtained by CNN, Larry Hall recounts a tough start.
I know when I was born, my mother told me that I was blue, that I hadn't got enough oxygen to me or something.
Identical twin sons growing up hard. In the Hall home, there was little money and lots of problems. Author Hillel Levin interviewed Larry Hall.
It was a very cluttered household. They're raised with dysfunction.
Neighbors say their mother was domineering. Their father drank and sometimes turned violent. He worked at the local cemetery.
What was it like growing up next to a cemetery? Was it creepy?
No, not at all. Not for me. At 12 years of age, Larry and I started working at the cemetery.
As he grew older, Larry had problems fitting in at school.
He was always the backward twin. I was the more dominant, outgoing twin. He hung out with what my wife and I and a lot of fellow classmates called the misfits or the stinky crowd.
Okay, so there you hear, once again, he had trouble fitting in. Was raised in a tumultuous home. Dad drank too much, mom was overbearing. And if if you think that these things do not develop a pattern of living for an individual or destroy their psyche in dangerous ways, I urge you to research that, because it happens. Let's continue to hear about Larry and Gary.
Still, the boys were best friends, and as young men, Gary and Larry developed an unusual new hobby as Civil War reenactors.
I met a lot of new friends during that time period, and I was able to travel around and meet them at the battlefields and go on tours and stuff. It was a lot of fun.
Larry was hooked, even growing mutton chops from his hairline to his jowl. Though the reenactments helped Larry make friends, he still struggled with women.
What was Larry like around young women growing up?
Very awkward, quiet, backward.
Did he ever talk to you about these urges? He reportedly says he had urges about women.
Oh my gosh, it was absolutely, it was out of bounds. I had no idea.
Jimmy Keene grew up 135 miles away in Kankakee, Illinois. He didn't know Larry Hall, and he had no idea that their worlds would someday collide.
It'll be third down and 5, the 25-yard line.
For Jimmy Keene, life couldn't have been more different. While Hall was an awkward outsider, Jimmy Keene was a star, especially under the lights on Friday nights.
We would come out here, the lights would be on, the whole stadium would just be completely full and the crowd would be roaring, and it was just a very euphoric, unbelievable high. The Friday night games were the biggest rush I've ever had in my life.
A gifted athlete, he lettered in 2 sports, studied martial arts, and inspired fear in everyone he faced.
Do you like having people terrified of you just a little bit?
Well, in that kind of sport, sure, you have to. Well, that's why they called me the Assassin. So.
You were the Assassin.
Yes, my nickname was the Assassin. And the reason my name was the Assassin is because I put somebody out of every game I've ever played.
Keene wasn't just the hometown hero, he was his father's namesake.
My dad generally sat up here in the corner over here. If I made a spectacular play, he would always give me the, "You did good, son," you know.
How often was he sitting in the stands?
Every single game of my life. Never ever missed a game. He never even missed my practices.
That mean a lot to you?
Absolutely. My dad was, he was my backbone.
Keene was as popular as he was athletic.
You were a legend.
Yeah, I mean, there was no doubt. I mean, they had posters of me all over town. I mean, everybody knew who I was with my sports ability. So yeah, I was the most popular guy around. There's no question. I was voted most popular guy in school.
Jimmy seemed to have everything, except enough money to keep up with the rich kids at school. And he only saw one way to get it. He started selling drugs and quickly learned he was good at it.
You're making decent money. You don't think, is this a wrong thing that you're doing? So I kept growing into it and growing into it. And by the time I was 20 years old, I mean, I was sitting on top of an empire.
By Keene's own account, he was pulling in around $1 million a year. He was addicted.
$1 million a year, guys, at 20 years old. The pool is there for a lot of people, but the payoff is very, very detrimental if you get caught. And not only if, but when, you know?
Not to the drugs, but the money.
It's hard to walk away from that kind of money, especially as a 20-year-old.
So he didn't. And that single decision would change the rest of Jimmy Keene's life and bring him face to face with an alleged serial killer.
Your license plate, extra HP.
Extra HP.
By the early 90s, Jimmy Keene was on top of the world. His booming business afforded him a lavish lifestyle with large homes, souped-up Corvettes, and an endless supply of women.
I would have 30 or 40K parties with volleyball nets, live bands. We'd have literally 1,000 people or more sometimes. I mean, these were gigantic, huge parties.
You were the guy women wanted to be with and guys wanted to be best friends with.
Something like that.
Back then, he owned this 6,000 square foot home.
Right behind that is a golf course.
He says he didn't stash the drugs here.
This is a walk-in closet.
But there was always a place to hide his fortunes.
This was a hidden trap door that you could open. And when you would open it, you have another hidden closet back in here. You can see my old safe is still here. And this was pretty much just my Fort Knox room.
For 15 years, Keene's empire remained hidden and growing. But as he lived the high life, his father fell on hard times, nearing the brink of financial ruin.
My dad, to me, was Superman. And to see him in such a hurt way really killed me.
So Jimmy used his drug fortune to bail his father out.
His dad resembles Kenny Rogers, wouldn't you say? What do y'all think? His dad resembles Kenny Rogers.
Then continued to support him.
Even though it was coming from something wrong, I felt I did something very right to make his world right.
But the money never seemed to be enough, and Keene couldn't stop watching his back. By the fall of 1996, the pressure of life in the fast lane was catching up.
I had woke up in the middle of the night and I was laying there wide awake. And I said, you know, I am tired of running like this. I said, I really just want this all to end.
And it was all about to end, but not the way Keene had planned. Just 2 weeks later,
I heard the front door rattle and I thought it was just the wind because it was in November. And next thing you know, boom, the whole door just blew off the hinges. And then they came flying in a straight file line with their guns drawn and their black uniforms. Move, we'll blow your head off. We'll do this. Just move one time. Rah, rah, rah.
For Jimmy Keene, it was over.
Everything stops and goes in slow motion. You don't even feel like it's real.
Keene was ultimately dragged to jail. He pleaded guilty, hoping to minimize his sentence. And at first, federal prosecutor Larry Beaumont was willing to negotiate.
Initially, we tried to what we call flip him to see if he would give us other drug dealers at the time. And I think he refused. So our reaction was to make sure he gets the maximum penalty.
Beaumont got his way, and Keene got 10 years. It knocked the life out of him and broke his father's heart.
Any hopes and dreams he had had for me at that point in life were gone. He was crushed. I mean, he was very crushed.
Jimmy Keene could not imagine a way out, nor guess that a man he'd never met might someday provide him one.
You know, I always thought that was just in movies, you know, how they got certain people to go undercover to get certain other people, you know, locked up, people that were locked up to give them the opportunity to be free if you collaborate with the police or the feds or whoever. I thought that was just in movies, and then I saw this and I was like, man, it really happens. Have y'all heard of anything like this before? Like, you know, a convicted felon going undercover to help the police nab an even bigger fish while they're locked up? I've never heard of that until this. Like, it just blew my mind a little bit.
November 1994, Wabash, Indiana. It had been 2 weeks since Larry Hall recoiled from a photo of Jessica Roach. And investigator Gary Miller had a gut instinct.
I really think we're onto something here. This guy portrays this weak, timid person, but I don't think he truly is.
Miller thought Hall was vicious, and as the investigation unfolded, Miller also thought he knew how Hall abducted Jessica Roach.
When he first seen her, she was riding from toward the house, going down this way.
Hall followed and stopped to talk. Jessica got scared and backed away.
That's when he opens the door, grabs her. There's a physical confrontation where he overpowers her, put her in his van, and left, probably going up this road right past her house.
In an interview in the Wabash police station, Hall surprised investigators by explaining what happened next. I tied her up, but I can't remember with what. I took her pants off. Hall said he raped her and led her off through the woods. I laid her up against a tree and put a belt around her neck, and she stopped breathing. Hall said he strangled Jessica from behind, so he didn't have to see her face as she died. And that wasn't all. All of the girls looked alike, Hall said. I cannot remember all of them. I picked up several girls in other areas, but I can't remember which ones I hurt. Several girls in other areas. There were more victims than just Jessica Roach. Hall said he'd also been near the campus of Indiana Wesleyan University, where Trisha Reitler had disappeared. I was over there because I needed to be with somebody. There was a small shopping center. I had a van. Hall said he raped and strangled a girl here too. Then he identified his victim by pointing to Trisha's picture. Trisha's disappearance had...
How do y'all feel about that? When somebody confesses to a crime like this, how do y'all feel about that? Give me your thoughts in the chat. I'm gonna pause this for a little bit. I want to hear from you guys. How do you feel about when somebody confesses to killing an individual? What are your thoughts behind that? Because there's a difference between somebody claiming innocence and somebody saying, yes, I did it. How do you feel about that? Yeah. I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, because it's one thing for them to confess like that, but are they confessing in a way to show remorse? Or are they confessing in a way to kind of relive the memory of killing someone? He says he doesn't even remember all that he hurt, who he hurt. They all look the same to him. To me, that's very evil. Very evil. Let me hear from you, chat.
had remained a mystery for 18 months.
We were just kind of sitting on the sidelines waiting for information to come in.
With little evidence and local police insisting on another suspect, Trisha's parents, Gary and Donna, still suffered.
I know with each thing that came in, the urgency was great, and the heartache was great too, and the anticipation and the hope.
Hall's confession meant the Reitlers might at last find their daughter, and that Gary Miller had found the killer of Jessica Roach. But the next day, Hall changed his story.
As I was talking to him, he said, well, I was just telling you about my dreams. And that didn't really happen. He said it was just my dreams. And I said, well, Larry, that's not what you said. You said this had happened and that, you didn't like talking about it because you didn't like the things that you'd done, but you never mentioned it being a dream.
But he stuck to his new story. Larry Hall was recanting everything.
Good call, Carl. Good call.
Larry Hall had confessed to killing Jessica Roach, Trisha Reitler, and 2 other women. And then he took it all back, claiming it was just his imagination.
I did confess to certain policemen I had dreams that I did and things.
But investigator Gary Miller had other evidence, like the witness who drove by this cornfield the night of Jessica's murder.
That person testified he was absolutely sure that when he went by here on that night, there was a guy coming from the cornfield to get in his van.
And a search of Hall's house and van revealed he'd been casing out small college towns and keeping suspicious notes. Seen joggers and bikers, many alone. Check colleges, parks. Seen some prospects. Hall also made lists for the hardware store. Buy 2 more plastic tarps. Cover all floor and sides of van. And Hall wrote himself troubling instructions. No body contact. Buy condoms. Buy 2 more leather belts. Find one now. Amongst Hall's things, investigators found newspaper clippings about Roach and Reitler, possessions from other missing girls, and pornographic pictures Hall had altered.
In those pictures, he had drawn what looked like a rope or a belt around the neck of one of the people, and on the left side of the mouth, he had drawn blood.
Hall insisted it was all just staged to make a play for attention, to feel important to police.
I put a bunch of stuff in that van that I drove around with because I knew they'd eventually search my van and find them.
During Larry's trial, his twin brother Gary tried to provide him an alibi. Still, federal prosecutor Larry Beaumont got Hall convicted of kidnapping Jessica Roach.
In the federal system, if you're guilty of a kidnapping, if that kidnapping resulted in the death, then under the sentencing guidelines, it's mandatory life term.
The Jessica Roach case was over, but the disappearance of Tricia Reitler remained unsolved, and her parents, Gary and Donna, could not stop looking.
You know, I don't see these billboards up as much anymore. I mean, and I know that there's countless people that are missing. I don't know if they're so expensive now because they're digital, most of them, but I don't really see a lot of these billboards up when people go missing. And that's a shame. They should have billboards designated just for that. Where, you know, we pay taxes. Why can't they use a percentage of the tax money to fund that billboard? Call it the Amber Alert billboard. You know, instantly flashing the person's face, their descriptions, whatever, all over the U.S. all at one time. We have money for other things that are not as important, but when it comes to human life, we act like it's just no big deal sometimes. And I'm saying we, as in government officials, you know, people that are in charge of protecting humanity, they could do so much better. Within seconds, it could be flashed all over. And some of these abductions might be stopped because instantly people would know, okay, this is who we're looking for. I just saw a man grab that person. I just saw a man's van that was parked next to this church grabbing a woman. Just my thoughts. I'm pretty sure it's not feasible due to a lot of things, but I would think that by this point, with all the technology stuff that we have, why couldn't it happen? How come it has to be the families that do all the digging and trying to find our loved ones? Because most of the time, as we've seen in other cases, if any of these females are drug addicts or prostitutes or just runaways or whatever, the police don't even take that type of disappearances. They don't take that type of situation as serious as they should. And it's sad because, you know, hours count, minutes count. Carl says, I just lived south of Indiana University. Several young ladies have vanished over the years. I want to ask you, Carl, how quickly were you notified of these missing females? Was it within days, within weeks? Because they say within the first 48 hours to 72 hours are the most precious times of a missing person's survival rate. So if we're not hearing about it till like 3 weeks later, there's a lot of things that could have happened to that person in those 3 weeks. Does that make sense? Man, it just, some of these cases and some of this stuff really is, if you're really looking into different things, it's a lot more traumatic than the cases that are being highlighted on YouTube every day.
We walked the sides of the roads. We walked the riverbeds. We looked under the culverts. We ended up going to crack houses because somebody had a lead.
If you see something on the side of the road, a garbage bag, whatever, it's like, could that be her?
It was just a horrendous crime to lose your daughter and never find out what the heck happened to her.
Larry Beaumont kept looking too.
Well, I actually made arrangements on a couple occasions to go out and look for the body.
Beaumont called in specialized military and law enforcement units to search.
But we weren't able to find it. So rather than give up, it occurred to me that obviously Larry Hall knew.
Beaumont needed answers and turned to an unlikely source to get them. He needed someone to befriend Larry Hall, someone charismatic, someone on the inside. Larry Beaumont needed Jimmy Keene. Beaumont had sent both Keene and Hall to prison. Now he hatched a risky plan that would bring them together. Keene was 10 months into his sentence when Beaumont brought him in to talk.
Scared me. I thought this was some trick.
Keene watched nervously as Beaumont pushed a folder across the table.
And I opened it up, and the first thing I seen was a picture of a mutilated dead girl. And I flipped the next page, and there was a different mutilated dead girl.
And there was a portrait of Tricia Reitler.
At that moment, I looked up at Beaumont, and he says, Jimmy, we need you to help us with this case.
Beaumont wanted Keene to go undercover, to transfer from his low security lockup to a dangerous prison, and to befriend alleged serial killer Larry Hall.
He says, if you can get solid confessions from him, and if you can help us locate the bodies that are still missing, we're willing to completely wash your record.
Keene's mission? To learn where Tricia Reitler was buried.
The purpose of this operation was to find that body.
Beaumont made it clear, no body, no early release. Keene would have to serve the rest of his 10-year sentence. But Beaumont believed Keene could do it.
He's smart, he's articulate, he's not afraid, and I knew he wanted to get out.
For Keene, it was a chance for redemption, to restore his family name, and, says author Hillel Levin, to get his life back on track.
This deal was a way for him to get home, and it was also a way for him to do good, to kind of take this bad thing he had done and to somehow turn it inside out and make it something that would solve a crime.
But it wouldn't be easy.
Fair to say he was risking his life. He could have been killed.
It was dangerous, absolutely.
It was highly risky. These people in those type of places haven't got anything better to do but try to hurt you and kill you too.
Keene was unsure, but a phone call home put his doubts to rest.
Because he's a very cagey individual. If he senses one thing wrong, he goes into his shell like a turtle and you'll never get him back out once he's in.
But Keene didn't have time to wait. He needed to get home to his ailing father. So hours after becoming a Springfield inmate, he spotted Larry Hall and made his first move.
I made it a point for us to bump shoulders together. And as we gently bumped shoulders together, I turned around and I said, oh, excuse me. I said, listen, I said, I'm new here. I said, you wouldn't happen to know where the library is, would you?
Hall offered to show Keene the way.
And I just reached over and I kind of slapped him on the shoulder and I said, thanks a lot. I appreciate that from a cool guy like you.
Over the next week, Keene watched Hall's every move from his cell across the hall.
And I walked up to him and I says, hey, this is where I'm at. I said, are you in this area here? And he goes, yeah, I'm right there. And he bugs his eyes out of his head. I said, oh, well, that's great. I said, you're right by me. I said, you know what? I told you were a cool guy and I'm glad that you're by me and all this and that. And that's when he basically offered sometime if I'd ever want to have breakfast with him and his friends.
Keene was making progress, slowly gaining Hall's trust, but life at Springfield was complicated and dangerous. So Keene figured out a way to use violence to his advantage. It was a Saturday night and Hall was in the TV room, mesmerized by an episode of America's Most Wanted about serial killers. Suddenly, another inmate approached the TV.
And you could tell this guy had been in for a long time. He was a real big, buff guy. And he just walked up to the TV, looked at everybody in there, and he decided he's going to turn the TV channel. And he turned it. And I found this very interesting. Larry looked at me and very quietly mumbled under his breath. He goes, "Hey, I was watching that show."
Keene leaped into action and knocked the guy out.
And I nailed him with an uppercut, and then I kicked him through 3 rows of chairs. He was beat up real bad and had to go to the hospital. And they took me and threw me in the hole.
It was worth it, and it was a breakthrough with Hall.
He not only now looked at me as a guy that he could look at and say, wow, he thinks I'm cool. Coming from him, that's a compliment. And now he's also able to protect me.
Now, Keene had Hall's trust and had him talking. One night in Hall's cell, he told Keene the truth about what happened to Tricia Reitler.
But what Hall told Keene was different from what some investigators believed. It was his story along with some evidence that created a roadmap I wanted to follow to try to figure out what happened to Tricia Reitler. Tricia would have left this supermarket parking lot walking just a couple of blocks back to campus.
Somewhere along this road, Hall told Keene he got Tricia into his van. When she fought off his advances, he says he choked her to keep her quiet.
So how would she have just gotten into his van? You get what I'm saying? Like he's saying it like so matter of factly, like, well, she jumped in my van and then I tried to advance on her and she fought me off, so I choked her out. Isn't it interesting, guys, that these individuals make their situation so matter of factly, like somebody said in the chat? Hey, Allison, how you doing? And any of you guys that I haven't said hello to this morning, hello, welcome. Carla, I've seen you. I've seen Carl. Rondi, of course. And Jeff H was in here for a while. I don't know if he's still in here, but you know, it's just a matter of factly that she just jumped in my vehicle and fought me off, and then I choked her out.
Hall told Keene he blacked out. And when he woke up, Tricia was naked and lifeless. Days after her disappearance, investigators found her blood-soaked clothes here, just 1 block from the supermarket. Hall's own notes indicate what might have happened next. Exactly 1 week after Tricia's disappearance, Hall wrote, "Cut out stained carpet, vacuumed van thoroughly, buy new hacksaw blades, clean all tools." Along with
So, have you noticed the patterns in this episode on other situations that are currently going on? This happened in 2014, 20 years ago. Or not 20 years ago, 10 years ago. Is it 20? No, 10. I don't know. I can't think right now. But anyway, in 2014, this happened. And look at the crime that we have today. We hear people wearing rubber gloves, vacuuming their apartments nonstop in the middle of the night. We hear, putting their trash into separate Ziploc bags. We hear them wearing rubber gloves to the grocery stores. We hear all this stuff. So do you believe that individuals that not only watch these shows to make themselves better at their trade. Do you think that they really think that these things work? I don't know. That's a good question for you guys.
His notes was this address, 700 West Slocum. We're in the woods halfway between Marion and Wabash, and it is possible that somewhere out here that Trisha Reitler is buried.
He said, so he got some lime together, he got a shovel, and he got a lantern, and he drove her way out into the woods, and he buried her out in the woods.
He admitted to you
Oh, yeah.
that he buried her in the woods.
Several times he's admitted that, yes. I basically made him feel like it was okay to tell me his secret.
But Keene still needed the secret that would set him free, the exact location of Trisha's body. Weeks later, he thought he nailed it when he found Hall hovered over a map in the prison workshop.
It was a map with red dots over Indiana, Illinois, and Wisconsin, and he covered it up really fast.
Lined up at the edge of the map were a dozen wooden falcons.
And I says, wow, this is pretty cool. Did you make these? He says, yeah, I make them. And he goes, it's really cool, isn't it, Jim? He goes, they watch over the dead.
Falcons to watch over the dead, and a map marked with dots. It was the information Keene thought would surely lead to the exact location of Trisha's body.
In that moment, what did you think? This is my ticket to freedom.
I did, because I thought, this is it. I've got solid confessions out of him. We know specific details. We know how he's done it now.
Keene believed he had his answer, that he'd soon be free, that he was done forever with Larry Hall. So that night at lockdown, Keene decided to tell Hall what he really thought.
I told him that he was a fucking sicko. I told him that he was insane. I said that you are one of the most despicable forms of human life on this planet. He, at that point, slid away from me and was like really terrified of me all of a sudden. And he says, Beaumont sent you, didn't he? Beaumont sent you, didn't he?
Keene had blown his cover, and his outburst landed him in solitary confinement.
It took some time before we found out that they put Jimmy in the hole, and so he was not able to communicate with anybody on the outside.
By then, Hall's map and the Falcons had disappeared. Worst of all, as Keene was let out of Springfield prison to face Larry Beaumont, he didn't know if what he'd learned was enough to set him free.
Interesting. What have you guys learned so far in this episode? You know, have you picked out the patterns? Have you picked out the opportunity? Have you picked out the escalation? If you're rewatching this later on, let me know in the comments what you think about some of the questions that I'm asking.
During his months in Springfield, Jimmy Keene got Larry Hall to provide details about several murders Hall was suspected of committing, including Trisha Reitler's. But Keene hadn't met the original requirements of Larry Beaumont's deal.
And I told him this myself, made it clear to him that if we didn't find the body, no credit.
Sitting in his prison cell, Jimmy Keene desperately hoped he had done enough.
Are they going to be fair and give me what's justifiably right on this, or are they just going to say, here's 6 months? It was a crapshoot.
Without a location for Reitler's body, Beaumont had a decision to make.
I made arrangements to have him take a polygraph test just to verify what he was telling us was the truth, which he passed, and he did make a legitimate effort to do what we sent him down there to do.
So Beaumont urged a federal judge to give Keene credit for time served. Jimmy Keene became a free man and returned home to his aging father.
What did you feel like when you were finally released?
I was happy as could be. It was a very bizarre roller coaster that I went on. It was, redemption at its best.
Keen had 5 more good years to be with his father before Big Jim passed away.
We both realized once I got out that there is a better world than just always in a constant dash to make money. You know, it was more like, look, let's just enjoy each other while we're alive here, you know.
It was closure for Keen, but not for the families of the alleged victims of Larry Hall. For years, there was no progress and no relief for people like Donna and Gary Reitler.
As a parent, there's the part that you've let her down and that you want to find her and you want to bring her home and you can't. I mean, we've done pretty much physically everything that we can to find her. And there's somebody out there that holds that one answer for us.
Beaumont, too, felt he'd done all he could and that the pursuit of Larry Hall was over.
There wasn't going to be no further prosecution from the federal perspective. He's already serving life imprisonment. He wasn't going to, you know, he was done.
Once again, Larry Hall had slipped off the radar, and it easily could have remained that way, except for Jimmy Keen. First, Keen's story of strange redemption was featured in a Playboy article, and then a book written by Keen and Hillel Levin.
Once we were able to write about what Jimmy went through, then things happened.
Keen's story refocused attention on Larry Hall, helped reopen cold cases, and put pressure on his twin brother Gary. Now, Gary stopped defending Larry and started talking.
Larry, just like Jimmy Keen calls him, and he's a baby killer.
You think your brother is a baby killer?
I don't have no doubt in my mind.
Do you think your brother killed more than Jessica Roach?
Yes.
Do you think your brother killed Trisha Reitler?
Yes.
Michelle Dewey?
Yes.
As Gary started talking more openly, detectives approached him, asking for help.
I went with the Indianapolis detectives down to try to get my brother to confess. He made me leave the room. He did, in fact, confess on tape to 15 serial murders.
Larry later retracted again. And while he can't ever seem to stick to one story, he does sometimes seem to have regrets.
I didn't want to keep living my life the way I was living it. I wanted things to be different, you know, but I guess I didn't really do the right things to change the way my life was going.
Larry Hall refused our request for an interview. He has never been charged with crimes against anyone other than Jessica Roach. But Keen's story has caused officials across the country to take another look at Hall.
In November of 2010, investigators from the town of Menasha Police Department interviewed Mr. Hall at a federal prison in North Carolina.
In that interview, Hall admitted murdering Lori DePease and provided clues about where to find her body.
There's multiple agencies that are looking into him, reference their unsolved disappearances.
Larry Hall may have had more victims than ever imagined.
We understand it's even more extensive than we ever thought. Not 20, but maybe 30 to 40 in terms of the victims.
That leaves 30 or 40 families still awaiting answers, which is why, says Levin, it is critical that serial investigations do not stop. 2 decades after Trisha Reitler vanished, her father, Gary, now believes Larry Hall knows where to find her.
I think if Larry knew what we go through on a daily basis, you know, wondering where she is, wondering what happened, I don't think he would have any choice to confess and let us know where she's buried.
Donna Reitler is not as sure.
Yeah, he confessed, he recanted. He confessed, he recanted. Without a body, it's just another possibility.
More than anything else, they just want their daughter back.
To have a place to lay her to rest, just to be able to sit and just talk to her.
Wow. That's intense, man. And I see you, girl next door. I'm gonna I'm gonna look into that, see if I can enjoy that as well. The podcast where the bodies are buried. I see that. Um, I don't think Larry gave a damn. You're probably right, Rondi. You're probably right. I mean, when it comes to individuals, once they kill, I mean, 30 or 40, if that was the amount, that's a lot of people. And then his brother said, I believe he was a baby killer. A baby killer. I don't get it. But that's why I want to focus on other crimes and other things that have been already, researched by other people. Obviously, CNN did that, and they aired it, and I was just commenting on it, which was a great piece, I thought. You know, thank you so much, SR8. Um, I had seen this before somewhere, but I don't remember what. I think it was maybe on the Absolute Crime channel that I had seen this talked about, but they didn't go in depth like this one did. This one went really in depth on the killer. That's why I say we always got to be aware of what and who we're around. I mean, we don't know if we fit. I won't say me because unless there's a serial killer woman out there looking for a guy that resembles me as their type, you know, I say that we have to be very mindful of what we do because you just never know if you're someone's type or profile that they're looking to fulfill a fantasy because opportunity is always there. You know, opportunity is always there. Yeah, Gary seems a bit odd. I get that too, Carl. Um, Allison says I'm always looking for new and old cases on YouTube. It was on Apple called Blackbird. Okay, I can't remember where I saw it, but I had heard of it a while back, and then I stumbled across this, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna do a series for the subs about truckers that are killers, because that's not really talked about. And I'm looking to get away from other certain cases that are high profile because not only has it been talked to death, but a lot of the information at this point is merely just speculatory. There's not a lot of credence to a lot of the rumors, and it seems very monotonous to me to talk about something that long. You know, um, I think there's other cases that could be highlighted that would be more important at this point because all we're waiting for is one of the cases is a trial. The other one, the Delphi case, they're still in their whole whatever gamut they're doing. The Sebastian case, he's still missing. Um, and the list goes on and on and on. There's a lot of people in court right now that are going through to get their fate. Um, so yeah, if you guys that are giving me these cases, if you could if you could do me a favor, because I don't know if I'll remember to look in the chat. If you could, under the comment section, write these cases down, and I will definitely do some lives on them because I enjoy doing different types as well. So if you could put those cases in the comment section to remind me to look those up, and I will do that. I will do that. Um, I hope you guys have started your morning or your afternoon in a great light. Coffee always gets you going pretty good, and you know, true crime followed up with that. You can't go much better than that. Um, Thank you so much for being here, everyone. Please be on the lookout for my lives because I'm very spontaneous. I wish I was more disciplined with, putting lives where people could actually, be notified when the live is happening instead of, being halfway through the live and then you get a notification that I'm live. I'm very spontaneous. So be on the lookout for my lives, if you will, if you enjoy the content. And please hit the like button, subscribe button if you're not already a subscriber. Um, Check out the merchandise. I know it's quite expensive, but you just never know. Somebody may want to buy the merchandise, or if you want to become a member, there's always membership that you can gift out to other people. There are perks, obviously, for memberships. And I'm just saying that just because it's part of the YouTube stuff, not because I'm asking for money or begging for money or even want money. It's just something that I have to do. You know what I mean? So you guys have a very wonderful day. And once again, thank you so much for being here. Please, if you have any cases that you want to see me talk about or stream that have kind of gone under the radar, that are not high profile, that need to be brought up or talked about, list those in any of the comments, and I will definitely do that once I research the case. Okay. Um, and thank you so much for. Yeah, the membership is. I don't know how to do it on StreamYard, but if you go to my channel, there's a button that says, or under this video on YouTube, it says join. So you can click that button and you can join. I don't know how. That's what I'm saying. I'm clueless to that avenue. Yeah, So if you just go to any of my videos, I think, or even on my channel, there's a join button. You click on that button and then you choose which type of membership you want. And I think they start at $1.99, $2.99, and $3.99 or something like that. Or you can gift membership to other people. I don't know how you do that. I think there's a little dollar sign at the bottom of the chat, and you just click on that. I don't know. I don't have a clue. You just play around with it. Just don't gift too much, okay? Don't gift because that's how I work. I will mess with something like that and I'll gift too much. Before you know it, I've gifted $200 to a creator or something, not even realizing it. So yeah, just just try to check it out. And if you enjoy the content and you enjoy my commentary or my presentation, please let other people know that this is a good place to chat, a calm place to chat. And I don't allow any drama. Your opinions are valid. And we agree to disagree in this channel. There's not a lot of arguing. I will not put up with that. And I definitely monitor the chat while I'm presenting, as well as I have great mods that monitor the chat as well. They do a great job. So you guys have a wonderful day, and I will catch you very soon. Get out there and live your life. Enjoy it, love it, and be safe because, time is fragile. Until we see each other again, Maestro, cue that music.